All right, friends, and we are back at the Pro Aging Podcast. We're at season 2, and we are at episode 4. I think I got that right, episode 4. And today we are speaking about weight loss. Now, a lot of you are thinking, okay, this is a lipo guy. We're just going to talk about sucking fat out. We're going to do the easy route. But as you know, in my book, in my practice, in my life, losing weight is more about getting a cosmetic procedure or going out on a diet. And in all honesty, there's an enormous amount of education and technology now that exists in the weight loss process. And I'm getting to the good part, guys, because I got a world-renowned expert here, Dr. Steven Batash, who's not only a board-certified gastroenterologist, but he's been in this game for about 30 years. So I can't wait to really hear about the evolution of how weight loss procedures and the lifestyle of trying to battle weight loss has been going on. Now, I can go through his long resume, and oddly, I found out we both did all of our training in New York, but I'm not going to go all through the minor minutia. What I am going to talk about is not only does he live in New York with his wife and sons, who I know personally, and honestly, all of them are much cooler than both him and I put together, but he also lives with his parrot, his turtles, his reptiles, his dogs. And I'm learning so much more about this guy as he sits here. But I want to welcome him. It's such a pleasure. We speak often because of common patients, and I'm hoping myself to get a little bit greater education about what we could actually do to help people with the struggle. So, Steven, Dr. Batash, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for inviting me. It's my pleasure to be here. You happen to be one of my favorite people in the world.
Oh, my God.
Both on a personal level, and I can also say that as a fan because I follow you very carefully on your Instagram, and I learn a lot about cosmetic dermatology.
Well, you got to follow this guy too, because he is a rising star. As I'm staring at his wife right now, who basically runs the show. What's your social media tag?
Steven Batash, MD.
All right. So let's first talk about weight loss as a whole, because I think whether you're going to see an expert like yourself or me, there are a lot of misconceptions about losing weight. It's very easy for people who are fit and thin and don't have a problem with weight loss to just be like, eat less, diet more. But there's so many facets, both genetic and lifestyle, involved in it. Tell me a little bit of what you see as a common misconception about people who are struggling.
As you just said, people think that losing weight is very easy.
Yeah.
They just say, just close your mouth, eat less. Exercise. Don't look at anything that's fattening. It's just really not that simple. There's a very heavy emotional, psychological component to this. And that's why people who are trying to lose weight really need to be supported very closely. Multiple studies have shown that when people become very stubborn and when they think that I will lose this weight because I want to, and they will go on these high-intensity diets, sometimes supplemented with heavy exercising and even weight loss medications. Yeah. Some people are able to last a month, some a couple of months, some 6 months. But what multiple studies have shown over and over is that people who go on this journey, over 95% of them eventually end up failing. Yeah. And the question is why? Because obviously these people are incredibly motivated. And you can tell by the fact that they almost in a very punishing way go about accomplishing their goal. But what they don't understand is that they're really fighting against nature. There's something called the set point theory. Yeah. And essentially, our brain has a perception of what our weight ought to be. And when we try to lose weight, when we're trying to diet, the brain misinterprets that. The brain thinks that we're still living in the caves thousands of years ago, and by definition, if you are not eating, it means because there's no food around, and the brain goes into some kind of a survival mode because it has to make sure that it keeps you alive. And the way the brain fights your diet, or you're not eating, or what the brain perceives to be your starvation and imminent death, is in two ways. Number one, it decreases your energy expenditures.
Yeah.
And number two, it drives your hunger hormone, ghrelin, sky high. So every time you try to lose the weight and you see that you're making some great progress, the brain says, no, this will not do. And it pulls you back to that weight that the brain thinks you ought to be at. And that's really why most people who do this end up failing.
This is definition of chasing your tail. That's doctor talk for chasing our tail. It's like up and down, up and down.
What people need is something to allow them to reset their set point. And that's where the interventions, whether they are surgical, endoscopic, come in, because they are the only thing that allow us to reset our brain set point. It's like we're re-educating our brain.
You're re-educating, because a lot of times we live in a society where like food that's processed, not good for us, it's everywhere, right? Because again, like a drug, you surround yourself with good habits, there's a higher propensity for you to acquire those good habits, and vice versa. If you're around bad influences with food and diet and nutrition, or poor access to good food, it's a similar thing. I tell this to my liposuction patients all the time, that ultimately the best results is going to be from like lifestyle changes, regardless of what procedures you and I are going to use to help. So again, I think that another big misconception is that for those people who really have excessive weight, we're talking about, people who need to lose their BMI is like greater than 25, 30, people who are obese. This vision of what bariatric surgery used to be, stomach stapling, rerouting the organs.
Scary stuff.
Scary stuff.
Very scary
Kind of like
stuff.
what liposuction was 20, 30 years ago, scary stuff. Now it's very different. What has changed about these procedures that make it better, safer?
So if we go back 30 years, essentially all we had was open procedures. In other words, if you wanted some kind of a bariatric operation, they would have to cut you open, and they would leave you with an ugly, ugly scar. But clearly these procedures worked, and
they did work. They worked well,
and they do work. We started out with the gastric bypass, then the surgical sleeve, the gastric band. These were all done open, and because of the method in which they were done, these procedures were associated with very high complications.
What would you say? Give me a number, average. 15%, 10% complication rate?
Closer to 20. The next stepping stone was the introduction of laparoscopy. And because laparoscopy is less invasive, the number of complications went down. And then along the way, about 20 years ago, the intragastric balloons came into being. They were briefly offered in this country. This was in the mid to late 80s. And then the FDA took them off the market because there were a couple of complications with the balloons. So these balloons did not make a comeback to this country up until about 6 or 7 years ago, but they really proceeded to do very well in South America. The idea of these balloons is, one, they make sure that the food stays in your belly for a lot longer, keeping you full. When you're full, you're not going to eat. And they take up space. So if normally you can put in this much food into your stomach, when the balloon is in there, the most you can put in is this much. The balloons progressed. The balloons have become more sophisticated. They've become safer.
What are they made out of?
They're made out of silicone.
Oh, yeah.
We fill them with saline.